Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Junkyard Dawgcast. I'm Jordan Hill. With me, as always, is Rusty Manziel. Rusty, how's it going today?
I'm here, man. On the road yesterday a little bit, and got to see some kids. And kind of weather was nice, so kind of got that spring fever bug, and the weather looks like it's going to be 70 or almost 80 degrees later this week. So excited to see some camp, some track season, and getting inching closer to spring practice.
Yeah, I saw some of your tweets. You're over there in West Georgia, East Alabama. I was going to hit you up, maybe go get some barbecue in Phoenix City. You should have let me know.
Man, I was in and out. Like Josh Pate said, you got to be back over that bridge before sundown. So I got through Central. I met with Patrick Nix for a little while and talked about Bo Nix going to Auburn and, going to Oregon and some of the things there. And Coach Nix does a great job at Central, and they're certainly loaded with talent. And it starts with a couple of major targets there for Georgia. And, we're going to update those on Dogs 247 some this morning, and probably by the time this airs, be some more updates from there.
No doubt about it. So Rusty and I will be doing this today. We're going to see if we can get Kip Adams on here. He's having a little bit of issue with his mic before we jumped on here. But a lot to talk about this week. A lot of things have been going on. Offensive line hire for Georgia. We've also got, you had the update on Arik Gilbert. We can jump into that. And some of the other stuff coming out of that Under Armour camp on Sunday. And then we can also talk a little men's basketball. But Rusty, let's kind of start things off with what really was the biggest news as far as Georgia football is concerned, and it's offensive line hire. Last week we found out that Matt Luke was stepping down after 2 seasons. It's going to be a familiar face. Stacy Searles is coming back. 2007 to 2010, he was a Georgia offensive line coach. Just what was sort of your read on the situation, and obviously why Stacy wound up being the new offensive line coach?
Well, first of all, me and you talked almost every day trying to cover this. There was a lot of twists and turns. I went into Friday, and in fact, you had a piece ready in case it did happen. I felt like at one point Friday, this was looking like it was going to be Eric Mateos out of Baylor. I think that was kind of the guy that most people thought. We kind of thought that. And then our early Saturday morning, some things started breaking that he was not coming to Georgia. So there's a lot of things that variables that could have happened over the weekend. So we don't know that. Like we said on the board, we don't do the hires and we don't do the interviews. We just try to get the information. And came to the board Monday morning pretty early with a post saying that I felt like Stacy Searles there was a lot of smoke there, and maybe 2 or 3 hours later that story broke. So you go back to this, and you mentioned in the very first piece we did on this, a couple of names to watch, and obviously Stacy Searles was going to be mentioned because he has a lot of ties to this program, and I'm pretty sure he has worked with Mike Bobo, he has worked with Todd Monken, he has worked with Kirby Smart, Will Muschamp, Scott Cochran, Todd Hartley, and Brian McClendon. So when you step back and look at all those things, maybe I should have took and we should have took Stacy Searles a little bit more serious from the start with this, because he had a ton of connections. I mean, everybody on this staff almost knows him or has worked with him. So there's a lot of familiarity there with him that probably made him a stronger candidate from the start. You go back and you look at him, where he was in 2007 through 2010, where he is now, what he's walking into at Georgia. What he's walking into at Georgia is probably, I would argue, say maybe the most talented room in the country, if not one of the top 2 or 3 most talented groups of players in the country. Sam Pittman still got some guys in there. Matt Luke, has got some guys in there now. So that room is extremely deep going into this spring practice and how things go. Now, recruiting is always the big question with any coach. How can this guy can recruit? What can he do? With Searles being at North Carolina, he's certainly going to have to reset his board. And I went back and looked this morning before we came on the air to do this, and really I didn't see a lot of crossover as far as Georgia and North Carolina looking in some early battles. I know that Coach Searles recruits his state pretty hard and always has because of his connections. He is from Georgia. He is from Tryon, Georgia, about 45 minutes north of Rome here where I live. So I'm very familiar with Stacy, and his board's going to have to certainly reset. It says a lot that Bo Hughley, the offensive line commit out of Langston Hughes, Georgia, had him in there yesterday immediately to get that relationship started with Coach Searles. So we're going to talk a lot about this hire, but I think the biggest difference in what Coach Searles is now as opposed to 2007, 2008, 9, and 10, there's a lot more people in the building, and recruiting is certainly different. There's a lot more analysts in there, and we don't touch enough on a guy named Eddie Gordon. He's the offensive line analyst for Georgia. Everybody I talk to, and this is with Matt Luke as well. Now, Matt Luke there, this guy did a lot of recruiting for Georgia, and these are the guys that taught these players day to day. This is the guy that kind of bridged the gap. Hughley told me on Sunday at the Under Armour camp, he said, look, I've been talking to Coach Gordon for a long time, and Kirby Smart. So, these guys and Dale McGee are the guys kind of recruiting me. So I think there's some different variables there. Certainly this is a very, very important class for Georgia, or Stacey Searles' offensive line. They got to sign some tackles in this class. So I'm going to see where he is and where this board sets for him over the next week or two. You'll start seeing some communication with these guys. Be interesting, but you don't sugarcoat this at all. This is a very important class for Stacey Searles. He's got to come out of the gate running at Georgia, and we'll see what he can do in his first calendar year.
Yeah, I think you hit on something that I kind of had thought of. And anytime, when we look at a hot board with any position, you think about connections. What kind of connections does a candidate have with the head coach, or the coordinators, anything like that? And that was there with Searles. And I think you saw that too with the video Georgia posted when he actually arrived in Athens with, Kirby. And I think maybe Scott Cochran might have been there as well. But you saw, that Stacey worked with several of those guys at LSU, Will Muschamp and Kirby, I think, for 1 year. So, I mean, the connections made sense when you looked at, his candidate.
Hartley down at Miami. I mean, and you start putting those things together, I was like, wait a minute, this guy's a lot more connected to the staff than I originally thought.
For sure. And I think the biggest thing that you and I have both seen sort of from the board reaction, our board reaction to Stacey being hired, is the big question about recruiting. And I've talked to a few people about this. I think I did a radio hit about this earlier this week. It's going to come down to recruiting, and it would have had it not been Stacey Searles had they hired somebody else. I mean, that's just sort of the name of the game, especially on the offensive line, like you said, especially with the needs Georgia has. So, I think that it's a very interesting hire. I think that Stacey obviously has been around and had a lot of success. I mean, going back to mentioning LSU, he was on that staff with Nick Saban that won the national title. So, you can see, and again, with both Hughley too, and I'm sure there's other targets out there that, they've hit the ground running. They understand how important it is to get in with those guys and make sure that everything is, everybody's on the same page and sort of what the expectations are. But it's going to be something to watch. It was sort of an interesting twist with Matt Luke stepping down. We kind of thought, will this coaching staff is set now? It's pretty much finalized, and now they go out. But again, they hire a guy they know well, that Kirby knows well and has worked with before. And it's going to be interesting. It'll be something, again, that we'll be watching and see how that goes and what it looks like, especially with spring just right around the corner. So I'm sure that Searles will be hitting the ground running on that front. I did want to throw it to you, Rusty, on a really interesting note that you had this week on Arik Gilbert. He was a guy that Georgia got, had been at LSU, had briefly been at Florida, had come to Georgia, had kind of taken a little bit of time away from the team last year. Just what do you have on Arik? I know he's a guy that a lot of people are really excited about, and sort of where things stand as he gets ready for spring ball.
With something like this, it's kind of, I wouldn't say day to day, but it's kind of week to every 2-3 weeks. What do you hear? Everything's still going fine with him. And, I've known this young man since he was in 8th grade, know his mother really well. And, that relationship ultimately led to me breaking the story of him coming back to Georgia. I mean, she called me up one day and said, hey, I want to give you this story. And that's kind of how that worked. And I've known him for a long time, and I know a lot of people around him. And, this young man is extremely talented. I mean, I've said it many times. He is the best jumbo athlete, I would say, for lack of a better term, probably that I've ever covered. At 6'5", what he playing weight around 250. If you saw him at 250, you would never guess this guy was 250. You would probably think he was 225, but he just carries it so well. It's hard to believe that somebody can do that. So He arrived back at Georgia shortly after Christmas, and you saw him in the national championship parade in that little video. So that kind of let everybody know that he was there. And we reported at the time that he was back in campus and trying to slowly get back into the process. And, my main thing with this has been, he needs to be a day-to-day student, collegiate athlete first before everybody starts worrying about, is this guy going to help Georgia right now? So, everything I've been kind of slow with this, just kind of checking from week to week. And I made some calls yesterday and made a call late last night, just double checking again. And before I want to put some information out, because I'm really careful with this one, but everything I hear, things are going really well with Arik. He is working out. He's taking reps, he's learning, plays again. He's, back as academically, doing what he needs to do. And, this young man had some issues. This is the real world. Now, this is real world stuff that he was dealing with. And it seems to be, the time he spent away from Athens and the treatment he was getting for his issues and his personal things seemed to be working really well. So no matter where Arik Gilbert is, it didn't matter if it's LSU, if it was Texas, it didn't matter. You wish the best for this kid because he has got unlimited potential. I mean, this guy can be a first-round draft pick. He was extremely smart in high school, high academic kid. Mother's a school teacher, so it's in his blood for education. And I just think that right now, man, everything's a really, really positive. And if things continue to trend this way, moving into spring practice, getting through spring practice, getting into those important conditioning months, those important 7-on-7 sessions in May and early June, where it's player-led. Those are very, very important reps. So if everything continue this way, and Jordan, you start looking at Georgia, and losing Jermaine Burton's a huge piece. We've never sugarcoated that, but if they can add Arik Gilbert in with Darnell Washington and Brock Bowers, you want to talk about a nasty 13 personnel. That would give people a lot of matchup issues because you can flex Arik. And basically, Georgia was playing Brock Bowers in the slot late in the year anyway. He kind of took Kearis Jackson's reps playing slot. So they were playing Fitzpatrick and Darnell, but people didn't kind of put two and two together. They were playing Brock in the slot. So you can do that with Arik Gilbert too. There's a lot of different things you can do with someone like that. But right now, I'm pretty confident in saying that things are trending really, really good for him. And this is a young man I've known again since 8th grade, so I'm pulling for him. And if he gets back to being Arik Gilbert, football Arik Gilbert, that is extremely good news for Georgia Bulldogs.
For sure. And like you said, it's a situation where you don't want to put the cart before the horse and just hope again that it's
Sure.
week to week and hopefully things keep trending in the right direction for Arik going forward. So busy weekend for you. I know this is just really a busy time of year, especially with the dead period finally up. But want to go back to Sunday. You guys had a chance to be at the Under Armour camp there in Atlanta. I think you guys battled a little bit of rain there for a bit, but what was sort of the atmosphere like, and what did you guys get to see kind of being on hand there?
Well, I can tell you what, owning a company MVP camps and putting on camps, I woke up with anxiety for those guys because it was raining, and you have to make a decision. There was 42 credentialed members of media there on Sunday, the largest they've ever had for any Under Armour camp. Tells you how many. There were people from Oklahoma, California that flew in all over the country for every major site you can think of, and newspaper that just about in the South was there. So kind of tells you the talent. But we got through the morning session. It rained a pretty good bit, and the O-line, D-line got to do their one-on-ones afterwards. I think, the story of the day was a young man goes by the name of King Joseph Edwards. And, he was at Hebron Christian last year as a 9th grader. Now he is at Buford, a sophomore now at Buford. And this kid's a 2024 defensive end, about 6'4", 235 pounds. And look, Georgia offered him, after those videos of what he did one-on-one Sunday against some very, very talented players, I think that kind of, and Georgia offered him that night, and he made no bones about it. In fact, he told Kip, and Kip's not on here, but Kip can back this up. He said, look, that was the one. I've been waiting on that offer. I mean, that's the one. So I think Georgia's in really good shape early on right here, and it is early. But this is you start talking about these elite edge rushers. This kid can bend. He was a lot bigger in person than I thought he was. But C.J. Allen's a guy I've mentioned a couple of times from Lamar County. This is our linebacker that Georgia has offered. Glenn Schumann has recruited him hard. Another kid out of Middle Georgia. He's going to get the Roquan comparisons already. A guy runs track, plays basketball, plays football, plays running back and linebacker. So he's already kind of getting those Roquan comparisons. And I never want to compare anybody to a top 10 draft pick. I don't want to do that to a kid, but because of the sports he plays, area is kind of from, those types of deals, that's kind of what the comparison is. But I think CJ now is a 4-star on 24/7 Sports, certainly earned that. And he looked good. Sammy Brown, young man out of Jefferson High School, I did a story on him last week. It's 2024. CJ's a 2023, by the way. And he's a very big target. Whit Weeks, I was on the road last week in Athens, had a chance to see him over at Oconee County. His dad played at Georgia. His dad played with Kirby Smart. David Weeks, former captain back in the middle 90s, played center. Dad played with Mike Bobo, Will Muschamp, a lot of connection there. So, you look at the linebacker class for Georgia in 2023, and Glenn Schumann has recruited from coast to coast, and he's made that clear, but he may be able to stay in state. If he can get Whit Weeks and C.J. Allen, it might be two guys that might be all he takes in this 2023 class. So I know Oklahoma and Stanford are two schools really, really in on Whit Weeks, is what LSU just offered C.J. Allen yesterday. So there's a lot of things going on. I think the overall theme was Georgia, the O-line guys, Madden Sanker from South Paulding, all these guys, Daniel Calhoun at Centennial, they're all waiting to see who Georgia was going to announce. So, Stacey Searles was announced Monday. So I think Justice Haynes is a guy every time I've seen Justice so many times now. I think the most impressive thing I saw to Justice, I don't know if you saw this, Jordan, on Twitter, is baseball. I mean, the kid was hitting 92. And then they said his curveball was 80, 83 with the largest spin rate they'd ever seen. So, I mean, this kid's a two-sport athlete now. And I know Georgia fans really, really want this Bulldog legacy, but I got to thinking, Jordan, what if this kid's drafted? What if this kid's drafted high, in baseball? I mean, you start talking about you're pushing early 90s, low 90s, and you got a nasty curveball and you're left-handed. It's a little different, man.
Yeah, I mean, I can't help but think about like Kumar Rocker because
Sure.
Tracy wanted him playing football, but I think he might have made the right decision there.
He was a big kid, man. Wow.
Well, I'll give you a chance to kind of catch your breath. I had you talking a whole lot there, Rusty, and we'll kind of talk about men's basketball. It's been a very interesting situation, kind of turn of events the last few weeks with Tom Crean. Getting closer to the end of his fourth season. Georgia is still riding a really long losing streak. They've lost 10 games in a row. I think now they've lost 18 of their last 19 games. And it's sort of a situation. I've talked to a few different people and gone on the radio and talked about this. I mean, it's pretty inevitable what's going to happen at the end of this season. The Tom Crean era is going to end after 4 seasons. The date of when that happens isn't clear yet. I'd imagine that they're going to get through. They play Missouri at Missouri on Saturday. Then they have the SEC tournament. They've locked up the 14th and final seed in the SEC tournament. They'll be playing Thursday in single elimination. If they lose, that'll be the end of it. But they're coming off what was, I thought, a really interesting game on Tuesday against Tennessee. And it was a game that coming into it, I really thought that Tennessee was going to be in a position to pretty much just name their score. I mean, they were coming off a really impressive win over Auburn where they out-rebounded an Auburn team that's got Walker Kessler and Jabari Smith by something like 21, 22 rebounds. So you look at that size and then just sort of projecting what Georgia was going to be able to do with them. I thought by halftime, Rusty, my story was going to be written. But it wasn't quite that easy.
Well, people don't realize these are still college athletes, and they have aspirations to go to the next level at some way. And so I think you look at the overall team and it's a disappointment, but individually you want to put something good on tape because these scouts watch every single tape. Tennessee probably walked in here thinking, man, we're about to drug these guys by 40. And next thing you know, you got yourself in a game in the second half. And like you said, they had to claw and scratch to get out of Athens with a win. But I think people kind of underestimate players individually like, hey, I got to still put out good tape, even though we're not winning.
Yeah, and I think you kind of have to border on the cliche, like, well, they're still fighting, and there's a little bit of that, and I don't think that they're just going through the motions. But it was really interesting after that Tennessee game to listen to Aaron Cook, and he talked about that. I mean, this guy was at Gonzaga last year, and I mean, he was playing like 14 minutes off the bench. But think about going from Gonzaga. Hey, there's our guy Kip Adams.
What's up?
Hey, sounding better than ever. What's going on, Kip?
Let's go.
We're just in time for commercial break. Kip Jones in right here.
Perfect. Let's make some money.
Yeah, let's do it. Well, yeah, just I'll just wrap up on that thought on men's basketball. Was just Aaron Cook really talked about the fact that these guys are still fighting, and to Rusty's point, they didn't sign up for the season to go the way it has, and they're going to still go out there and try to make plays. And they've come close with a few different games. We mentioned before we started recording that Auburn game that they came so close to winning in Stegman. They're still fighting, and they got at least 2 more games left in them. And I think truly they've got a really good shot at winning at Missouri. That's a Missouri team that's really struggling. But yeah, it's a very interesting time on the Georgia men's basketball beat, and we'll be all over what comes out of this game and what comes next. So on that, now that we got Kip back, we're all good. Let's take a quick break, and then we'll be right back. All right, welcome back. Well, I'll throw it to Kip since he's with us now. Just to give us an update on everything that's been going on that sort of stands out to you. We've been talking about sort of the way recruiting's been going, just this sort of busy time of year for Georgia, and what's sort of coming up, especially with spring practice just around the corner.
Yeah, I mean, Kirby Smart is learning that attrition is normal on the coaching staff. With success breeds new opportunities for coaches, but also an opportunity for him to kind of retool and get some guys in there that, maybe have some of the same philosophies of what they want to do both on offense and defense. So with that in mind, I think right now you're going to see in the spring just the board being reset at multiple positions. We saw wide receiver offers going out. I would imagine that Stacey Searles, will want to make sure he's getting the kind of guys that do what he likes to do offensively as well, and with what he's known for with that pro style. And I think that experience is probably what really attracted him, Kirby Smart, to him and the coaching staff. I think it's kind of just interesting the fact that he's worked with, I think, five on the field coaches and 2 of the guys that are on the support staff as well, and Bobo and Scott Cochran. So I think some people kind of look at familiarity and think that could be an aspect where maybe Kirby Smart just went with what he was comfortable with. But I kind of look at it as, I don't think there's a coaching staff in the country that knows what Stacey Searles brings to the table more than this coaching staff. So I think that's going to help, and just that continuity in recruiting is going to help as well. I think Kirby Smart, has a standard for recruiting, and he's going to ask a lot of these guys, and whether or not these, they've worked a lot of big time programs, McClendon, Searles, the new guys, Fran Brown and them. I think they're going to learn very quickly that, there are no days off from recruiting with Kirby Smart, and they're going to be meeting weekly, if not every day, to make sure that board is exactly the way Kirby Smart wants it. And I think Rusty and I saw kind of at the Under Armour camp over the weekend that Georgia has a lot of recruiting equity right now. Now that they've won it, they've shown they can do that. I think that really stood out to a lot of guys, and even the offensive linemen, not even having an O-line coach in place. Their interest in Georgia was pretty sky high, and they kind of trusted Kirby Smart that he was going to bring a guy in that they like. So overall, I think, it's just, they're just ready to get spring football in here and get some recruits on campus. And I think that's that's really where we're going to start to see a little bit more traction as far as that national championship. Everyone kind of wants to see what this team looks like the year after as they try to defend. So I think getting guys on campus in that spring game, it's going to be heated. It seems like Alabama, Ohio State having the spring game on the same day. We always see that these guys can only go to one spring game. I think that's kind of going to be the entertaining part, is watching the coaching staffs scratch and claw trying to get everyone on campus that same day. But Kirby Smart, he doesn't care what day you're in Athens. You can come in on a Tuesday, on a Thursday. He just wants you in town and to have that opportunity to get some face time with the coaching staff and sell the Georgia program.
Yeah, I want to ask both of you guys something that Kip hit on there, and I think it is really interesting. And I think we'll probably learn more about it in the weeks and months to come. But you hit on the fact that Georgia finally won the national championship. I'll say from my experience being in Auburn, I got to see plenty of Auburn fans who would tweet at me how many days it had been since 1980. Well, that streak ended, and I'm sure that there were college coaches out there, on the opposing staffs that probably brought up the fact that Georgia had not, come through in that way. What have you guys seen, or what are your immediate thoughts just on how much kind of relevance that has with recruits? The fact that that streak is over, that after 41 years, Georgia is a national champion, and how that kind of, how that stands out to recruits as they're deciding where they want to
go. For fans, it's a huge deal, but for players, it's all about, hey, am I going to play early? And are you putting guys in the pros? And Georgia has shown they'll play you early, and they've put a ton of people in pro. I think the last bit of negative recruiting that I hear, and everybody does it in some fashion, form, or way, but the negative recruiting against Georgia has been on the defensive line and hadn't had players drafted and all that stuff like that. That has been a huge deal. A lot of schools have used that, because I talked to a lot of kids, kind of off the record, or parents, and say, hey, what do people use against Georgia? And the defensive line not getting people drafted. So not only they won the national championship, that narrative is gone. And in about another month and a half, when that draft comes up, the D-line not getting drafted is going to be gone as well. I mean, that's going to be an irrelevant deal with what Trey Scott has brought into this one with Jordan Davis, Trayvon Walker, Devontae Wyatt. I mean, these guys are all going, probably top 50. So, and Kip, I'm sure Kip and Jordan, you as well, already these quotes that's coming out today from the combine. Kirby Smart don't have to tell George Pickens what to say. I mean, George Pickens is on his own now. There's no repercussions. He can be his man's man up there and say what he wants. But when he comes on a platform like that in front of everyone and says, hey, at Georgia, I got prepared for the NFL, because half the team's NFL. We practice like an NFL team. I already feel like I'm in an NFL every day at practice. I mean, those types of things, man, they're invaluable. And I'll be interested to see what Jordan Davis and Trayvon Walker and those guys say. But not necessarily on my end. Kip probably would agree, and we'll ask him to say it. But I don't hear much from prospects saying, hey, Georgia hadn't won it. All they know is Georgia played for it a couple of years ago. They're in the playoffs again this year. That's really all that matters. I'll never forget being at the Rising Seniors game probably in like 2011 or 12, and they brought in Charlie Ward, and I'm sitting there like a fangirl, and not one kid in the room knew who Charlie Ward was. We asked them to raise their hand if they knew, and nobody knew. And I was like, what? And this guy was the Heisman Trophy winner, unbelievable football player, played for the Knicks, and these kids don't know. And now I'll never forget that going, they're young, man. I mean, it's really what happened 2 or 3 years ago is what's ingrained in their minds.
Before I throw it to Kip, just sort of on that point, I think it was Bud Elliott did a video, I guess it's been probably a month or so ago, where he talked about, the recruits like right now, they don't remember like the Rose Bowl with Vince Young and USC. So it's like, to your point.
No, absolutely not.
Yep. No, they don't know who Peter Warwick is. I mean, there's a whole generation of guys that we grew up watching. That's just how it goes, but it doesn't last a decade. It's 5 or 6 years in college. And yeah, Rusty brings up, I mean, John Jenkins was the last defensive lineman drafted for Georgia, 2013. Obviously that streak will be broken in this year's draft, but that's something Trey Scott. I mean, you think that wasn't a daily thread on the board, was, just about Trey Scott. Can he be that kind of recruiter? Can he bring in that, elite defensive lineman? And, he developed Jordan Davis, and he brought in, I mean, these are guys that 2 years ago, no one except for the people on our board knew about Devontae Wyatt and the fact that he played running back in high school in Decatur, at 6'2", 270 pounds. And now, he's pushing to possibly be the first defensive tackle taken. There's a good chance Georgia's going to have the first 2 interior defensive linemen drafted. So I don't think Trey Scott's going to have that aspect of negative recruiting going at him. And I mean, he just brought in an incredible recruiting class. I think maybe the recruits watched the product on the field this year and he was able to sell them on being the next group of guys. For me, I think the only thing really kind of left maybe is that wide receiver position. The production, at Georgia, you got Ohio State and Alabama just pumping out multiple 1,000-yard receivers every year. And Georgia's still having 1,000-yard receiver in Terrence Edwards. That's probably the one aspect of recruiting, the only thing left, because every other box has been checked by Georgia. I mean, you have the chance to get to the league. You have a chance to win it all. George Pickens is still going to be a guy that's taken very highly without putting up those stats. But these guys, the wide receiver position, they want to get numbers and they want that production. That's an aspect that for Georgia, you got to find that guy that, maybe isn't too worried about that. He still wants to get to the league, but he wants to win and he wants to buy into the program. Those are the kind of guys that Georgia's recruited. If they want to get the guys that want numbers, then the offense kind of has to put those numbers out there. But I think there's some elite guys that are going to be on campus the next couple of weeks. And we'll see Brian McClendon. He's known as an elite recruiter. And I think getting these guys on campus in Athens in this spring, we're going to see that board set, and they're going to be in for some guys that maybe they haven't been in the last couple of cycles.
Definitely a busy time of year with men's basketball wrapping up. Visits all over the place right now. Spring practice closing in. Guys, is there anything else you guys want to hit on before we wrap this thing up?
For me, for me and Kip as well, this is a slow month in February. Obviously some coaching changes were a lot of news there. When Jordan, you came over. Visits opened back up for Georgia, yesterday, but next week Georgia's on spring break, and I would imagine every coach on that staff is going to be going somewhere, and the players will be going somewhere. But I always look at this: if you have no news next week, I don't want to talk about the no-hitter. If you have no news next week, when Georgia comes back, man, it's on. It's spring practice, it's recruiting, it's coaches on the road in April, it's spring practice, coaches out on the road in May, which goes right into spring high school games, which goes right into summer camps on June the 1st. So I just looked at my calendar yesterday and I thought, man, we got about 10 more days, and then it's going to be fifth gear for a while. So I know, recruiting updates and things like that. That's why I kind of went on the road yesterday to see some kids. Kip got some great interviews this week in Under Armour, but it has been a little bit slow with recruiting right now. But I can tell you, get through about another 10 days, and it's going to be wide open from about March the 10th on, and I'm looking forward to it.
I'm pumped about the combine, man. I want to see which one of these players tears it up.
Yep.
The Georgia's presence this combine, the most guys they've ever had out there, but who's the guy that tests off the chart? Remember when Chris Conley just came out of nowhere he was a good player at Georgia, but the numbers he put up, that was an eye opener. You could name 4 or 5 guys from Georgia who could put up some crazy numbers, and we wouldn't be surprised. Channing Tindall being the Spark champion, basically. Quay Walker's probably going to test pretty well. What is Trevon Walker doing? He's already projected to be the first guy taken. He might crack the top 10 at this point, maybe top 5. I want to see what he does out there. So for me, it's the combine this weekend. That'll get me to the other side there where we're getting pumped. I'll still be looking at all the measurements next week and looking at the updated mock drafts. It's always been my big thing that I've always enjoyed following. So, before I know it, that'll be over and practice will be here. But I think this month, this is it for me, man. This is like Christmas for me, seeing the combine. I've always been the best part of the year. So, especially with Georgia, the presence there this year, there's going to be a lot for us to talk about.
No doubt about it. We'll be all over it. And hey, guys, next time I'll be talking to you guys. I'll be coming to you from Athens. So I hopefully have a move all done and excited. I'm excited that the spring break came when it did. I might actually be able to go eat at a couple restaurants without having to fight traffic. But excited for that. Excited for all the stories we're going to be coming out with the next few days and weeks. We're going to wrap it up with that right there. For Rusty Mansell and Kip Adams, I'm Jordan Hill. Thanks for tuning in, and until next time, take care.